Hey, Elnev here. I think I'm gonna call these things like car chronicles. They have coworker chronicles. I'm gonna call them car chronicles, where we sit in a car, go from place to place, make some videos that are hopefully helping out and giving you information you have been looking for or hoping to receive, or have questions you just don't get answers, or you were just looking for something to do and something to look at to break from Netflix for a few moments. So if you have tuned in, I thank you and I welcome you. So wanted to chat about something that interesting that I just saw, and it has to do with Facebook ads. So about a month ago or so, I had shared with my real estate investing secrets Facebook group that I have seen way less real estate investing and real estate learn how to invest ads on Facebook, and that it was good because it was signaling that things are being shaken out, and that it's one of those like slowing down times and that kind of stuff. So since then I have noticed that some of the ads have come back. There are definitely some that have never left, but there are definitely some ads that have come back. And one of the interesting ads that I just saw this morning is inviting people to learn how to be land developers. Now, developing a land is a pretty intricate process, right? Because you gotta, source the land, then you gotta source the labor, then you gotta get permits, then you gotta build the darn thing, and then you have to figure out, like, what do? Are you selling it? Are you refinancing and holding it, and that kind of stuff? Because when you are developing land, it is a relatively speaking costly production, because you got to pay for that land, and typically you can't just finance land. Like, there's some programs here and there depending on the property type, but more often than not you can't finance land. So again, specific programs do exist for it, so just if that's what you want to do, you definitely want to look out for that. The second piece is that when you decide to develop it, you're going to have to get all kinds of permits, which, I guess you can build illegally, but that doesn't make sense. So you're going to have to get permits. And then you're going to have to get some contractors to build this stuff. Now, if you're developing, like just building a house, that's one thing. But if you are building an apartment building or some larger commercial property, you're going to have to get a much bigger builder, and most of them are going to be unionized. And again, it goes from place to place, is a little bit different. But like, for example, here where I live in Providence, if I was developing anything and engaging builders to come in, then I would, all of them are unionized. You have to get the unionized, which means you're paying higher wages and all that stuff. And so we can argue that it's good or bad. It's irrelevant for the story. If I was to build down in Cranston, which is a town next door, basically, I don't have to get unionized. It's not a big deal. So something for you to consider if you want to go into this thing. But so they were talking about, like, oh, we're going to come and we're going to teach you everything you need to know in like 30 minutes. We all know that that's not how it works. We all know that that's just a webinar, at the end of which they will likely sell you into the course to learn how to do that stuff. And for folks that have some money, or have sources of people that have money that you feel comfortable like partnering with or borrowing from and that kind of stuff, it actually might make sense. Where my sort of reservation kind of comes from the large development pieces is that where we are in the economic cycle. So we just got a new unemployment report that came in yesterday. There was like 5.6, 5.8, something like that, million people that have claimed unemployment. So if we add that 5+ million to that 18 million plus whatever people were not even counted before, we are looking at 25 million people that are unemployed, and so we are well over 10% of unemployment right now. I would say roughly we're probably around like 14ish. Does that sound right? Feel free to correct me. I'm making things up as I go based off of the previous math, so just trying to kind of guesstimate. So that's where kind of the problem lies. You have high unemployment. Those people are not going to be looking to buy anything anytime soon, right? Like, they are in survival mode. Most of us are in survival mode. And so that's kind of where the challenge comes in, number one. Number two is that the number of people that are going to be retiring, that are going to be moving and selling their homes, is going to go through the roof in this decade. And coronavirus has just sort of amped that up, has made more people likely needing to sell. Some of them will not want to sell, they just might have to sell. So between the people that are unemployed, between the people that cannot afford their mortgages, so they're all in forbearance now and are going to have to repay back that loan in the next 6 to 12 months, between the elderly that are prevalent. I mean, we have millions of them in the United States. Developing of the land is a high risk, high reward, because if you overbuild, then the prices kind of go down. And I know that there are certain areas where building is necessary, it's needed, but it's not everywhere. So for some areas, developing the land makes sense. For some areas, I don't know. I don't think it does. Personally, I would rather be the person that supplies the land to these developers, because they would pay me right out, and then all of the carrying costs, all of the expenses, all of the labor stuff, all of the who's going to sell and how we're going to do this stuff is going to fall on the developer. And so I'd rather kind of do that piece. Here's the other crazy stuff. BlackRock, which has been developing properties and buying and that kind of stuff, they gotten out of the market and out of that stuff. I think they closed off some of the final pieces in late 2019, maybe early 2020. Don't quote me on that, but they are out. If the largest developer is out of that particular business at the moment, what makes you and I think that we can just jump in and start a developing business for like $5,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 or whatever? It is, relatively speaking, pricey. And so for me, I always look at, when it comes to sort of like developing or buying already developed, I look at cost per square foot. And the reason I look at cost per square foot is that if the cost per square foot to obtain something that is already built, and I have to do minor tweaks to it to be able to make money from it, as opposed to spend the same amount of money to build something new, I'm going to go with something that is developed, because my cost to bring it to the market is going to be way less. So that's kind of something to think. Now, if my building cost is, say, like $2 per square foot, but what I can purchase, and by the time I like reposition and refurbish it and do that stuff, ends up being like $5 a square foot, then developing does make sense. That's not necessarily where we are right now. That I don't think, but I haven't looked at it in a little while. So what I'm saying is, when you see these things, it sounds really lovely at the beginning, and most people get hung up on the, yeah, I'm going to make this like all this money. And, I'm saying, if you've never done real estate, that's basically whom they're trying to sell to. If you've never done real estate, go with easy. Go with easy. Look, it's easier for me. I'm sitting here in a car. It's easier for me to take this car that is already built to the market and resell it to somebody, right? Than it is for me to say, I'm just going to start a car factory and like build it. Duh. It's the same concept, y'all. It's just because it's called real estate and it's house, and you understand that it has to have plumbing and roofing and all of that stuff, it doesn't make it any different to me to say, I can refurbish and resell this car. And cars are bad because they go down in value, right? They don't go up unless it's antique, right? But that's kind of where my brain is going and my thinking goes. It's much easier for me to jump into something that already exists, that I can start making money right away, as opposed to sourcing the land, buying the land, hiring a large number of people that I have to carry on my books, meaning I have to pay these people for months and months and months and months in advance. And you never know when the construction is going to be over, because it's weather dependent, it's permit dependent, it's supply dependent. And if you've been paying attention to the video that I've done on April 10th, if you were there and watching live, you also know that materials are starting to be hard to source and they are starting to become more expensive. So I don't know that it's the best time to do it if you have never done it. If you have, perhaps it could. But if you haven't, I don't know that it's the best time. I think sourcing some of the properties that are already up for sale, that are super low, that are super below market. I mean, I just saw a county in Northern California is going to have a sale at the end of May, and I want to say it was 80 acres. I want to say it was 80 acres. It was 40 or 80 acres, which is a lot of land, y'all. That was, it potentially could be agricultural, so you could get a farm, and I think it was selling for like $10,000. This is what I'm talking about. I'd rather buy that land for $10,000 than find these wannabe developer to sell it to them for $100,000, walk away from the deal, making mad money, without having to do any work whatsoever. Like, that is the amazing piece. And that is the stuff that I teach on Flip It Online Masterclass, that I teach on Real Estate on the Cheap Challenge, that, I'm trying to get people to understand of, you want to get into game that has low risk, high reward. Developing is high risk, high reward. I don't like those odds, period.